Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Tuesday, May 28. Ugly weather day outside, and the Dow Jones sloughed it off, finishing at 15,409, up 106 points or 0.7%. It is 4:02 p.m. Eastern Time. S&P 500 up 0.6% at 1660, 10 points. NASDAQ at 3488, up 29 or 0.9%. Gold closed at 1380. Oil 95.10. And the 10-year Treasury, the yield is up to 2.16%. I'm on record as saying wake me up when it's 2.25. It was 1.63 on May 2nd, so somebody bought at that level and somebody is hurting. Especially in those bond funds, got to be careful. London up 1.6%, Paris up 1.4%. Frankfurt up 1.2%, Milan up 2.1%. In Spain, the total value of mortgage lending in March was down 90% from the peak of the credit boom there in June of 2007. Can't read my own chicken scratch. I think it's January of 2007. Greece is expecting record tourist bookings for the summer. That's good, especially from Germany and Russia. Tomorrow, the European Union is going to ease its hard line on austerity in its annual verdict on national budgets of all 27 European Union members. France, Spain, and the Netherlands will be given a waiver on the annual 3% of deficit limit. Perhaps more on that tomorrow. Tokyo. The last 4 trading days have contained a 7% decline and a 3% decline. Today, Tuesday, it was up 1.2%, the Tokyo Nikkei. Markets there are very confused over the Bank of Japan's bond buying program. The BOJ, following Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's wishes, seeks to lower interest rates across the yield curve, pushing investors into riskier assets like stocks, while at the same time it aims to achieve a 2% inflation rate after years of deflation, which would pressure interest rates. As the chief bond strategist at Nomura in Japan told the Financial Times, eventually the target is the same, to push up the economy, but en route they are having contradictory implications for Japanese government bonds. In China, Premier Li Keqiang, actually traveling overseas for the first time in Berlin, told German business leaders his country is confronted by, quote, huge challenges as it seeks 7% growth this decade, quite a come down from 10% the prior 10 years. The government has previously been talking 7.5%, so it's a little controversial, and people are wondering if Premier Li, if what he's saying is getting lost in translation, or they are ratcheting down growth further. And many would say that when China says 7 or 7.5, the reality is it's closer to 3 to 4%. China's president, Xi Jinping, said relations with the United States were at a, quote, critical juncture as the June 8 summit between Xi and President Obama outside of Palm Springs. He's just about 10 days away. White House National Security Advisor Tom Donilon has been in Beijing meeting with Xi as they set an agenda for the summit, which is being labeled a casual summit. Xi said yesterday the current China-U.S. relationship is at a critical juncture to build on past successes and open up new dimensions for the future. California summit will be an important opportunity for U.S. leaders to learn more about the diplomatic intentions of Mr. Xi, who foreign policy experts have described as more confident in foreign affairs as well as more nationalistic about China's role in the world than his predecessor Hu Jintao. China remains concerned about the Obama administration's effort to shift its military and strategic focus to the Asia-Pacific region. Thomas Donilon's visit is expected, or Donilon is also expected to meet Chinese defense officials. Of course, in recent months, the Pentagon and private U.S. firms have said Chinese hackers are targeting U.S. companies and agencies, and along those lines, Ellen Nakashima of the Washington Post reported today, quote, "Designs for many of the nation's most sensitive advanced weapons systems have been compromised by Chinese hackers, according to a report prepared for the Pentagon and to officials from government and the defense industry. Among more than 24 major weapons systems whose designs were breached were programs critical to U.S. missile defense and combat aircraft and ships. According to a previously undisclosed section of a confidential report prepared for the Pentagon leaders by the Defense Science Board, experts warn that the electronic intrusions gave China access to advanced technology that could accelerate the development of its weapons systems and weaken the U.S. military advantage in a future conflict. The Defense Science Board, a senior advisory group made up of government and civilian experts, did not accuse the Chinese of stealing the designs, but senior military and industry officials with knowledge of the breaches, and the vast majority were part of a widening Chinese campaign of espionage against U.S. defense contractors and government agencies. The significance and extent of the targets help explain why the Obama administration has escalated its warnings to the Chinese government to stop what Washington sees as rampant cyber theft. The Washington Post obtained the confidential list of compromised weapons system designs and technologies. And when the list was read to independent defense experts, they said they were shocked by the extent of the cyber espionage and the potential for compromising U.S. defenses. That's staggering, said Mark Stokes, executive director of the Project 2049 Institute, a think tank that focuses on Asia security issues. These are all very critical weapons systems, critical to our national security. When I hear this in totality, it's breathtaking. Turning to Syria and the spreading conflict as it spills over into Lebanon and Iraq. Today, Tuesday, gunmen fired on a Lebanese government checkpoint near the Syrian border, killing 3 Lebanese soldiers. The attack comes amid escalating tensions in Lebanon, linked to the Syrian conflict, in which rival Lebanese groups have now taken sides, exactly what we didn't want. In Brussels, European Union member states decided to allow an arms embargo on Syria to expire While none of the bloc's 27 members have any immediate plans to send arms to the rebels, British Foreign Secretary William Hague said the decision sends a very strong message from Europe to the Assad regime. In February, foreign ministers agreed to enable any EU member state to provide non-lethal military equipment for the protection of civilians or for the opposition forces, which the EU, accepts as legitimate representatives of the Syrian people. Opposition activists said Syrian troops, backed by Lebanese Hizbullah fighters, were pressing a sustained assault on Qusar, a town long used by the insurgents as a way station for arms and other supplies from Lebanon. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius told reporters in Brussels there was also increasingly strong evidence of localized use of chemical weapons in Syria. And then yesterday, Senator John McCain paid a surprise visit into Syria to meet with the opposition. General Salim Idris, who leads the Supreme Military Council of the Free Syrian Army, the man that McCain wants to see lead the opposition because he's viewed as a moderate, said McCain's visit came at a critical time for the rebels, who have been stepping up their call for U.S. support, including heavy weapons. McCain entered Syria from the border with Turkey and stayed there for several hours. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts to bring polarized international actors together for a major peace conference in Geneva, starting in a couple weeks, faltered as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that organizing the forum was a tall order. Despite claims of progress by both the U.S. and Russia, there is little evidence to suggest either side in Syria is ready to halt the violence. U.S. President Barack Obama has demanded that Assad leave power. Russia has stood by its closest ally in the Arab world. Secretary of State John Kerry said the U.S. and Russia were committed to starting a political transition that would allow the people of Syria to decide the future of Syria. We are committed to this, Kerry told reporters. We both want to make this conference happen if possible, together with many other countries that will join it. However, Sergei Lavrov, in saying much work needed to be done, added, "We discussed how we can proceed in our efforts to make this conference happen. It's just not an easy task." Meanwhile, back to Lebanon. 2 rockets hit Hizbullah strongholds in Beirut on Sunday, tearing through an apartment, a day after the Lebanese Hizbullah leader, Nasrallah, pledged to lift President Bashar Assad to victory in Syria's civil war. Nasrallah made it clear there is no turning back. In a televised speech on Saturday, he said Hezbollah will keep fighting alongside Assad's forces until victory, regardless of the cost. For Hezbollah, it may be an essential battle. If Assad falls, Hezbollah's supply line of Iranian weapons through Syrian territory would dry up. And then Hezbollah would be increasingly isolated. At the same time, Hezbollah, a Shiite Muslim group, is raising the sectarian tensions throughout the region, throughout Lebanon, by declaring war on Syria's rebels, which are primarily Sunni Muslims. And I've been to Lebanon a couple times. You have Sunnis and Shiites and Christians and Alawites. You have the same factions that you have in Syria. It's just a classic spillover. In Tripoli, Lebanon's second city, which is north of Beirut. At least 25 have died in fighting there. Nasrallah added, "It is our battle and we are up to it." Hizbullah is essentially the ground force for Assad while the Syrian army conducts the airstrikes. And of course, Hizbullah is a very effective military force. Ask the Israelis after the 2006 war between the two. And the next war will be awful. Because all Hezbollah's been doing since 2006 is adding tens of thousands of missiles. And as I said, the war in Syria has spilled over into Iraq. More than 70 were killed in a wave of bombings in Baghdad on Monday. 700 were killed in sectarian violence in Iraq in April, and at least 300 have died thus far in May. Actually, 300 in about the last 10 days. Finally, surging anti-Muslim sentiment in the UK after the awful death of British soldier Lee Rigby. There were all kinds of demonstrations the last few days in Britain, most led by the English Defence League. You're going to hear an awful lot about that group in the coming weeks, months, and potentially years. The EDL, I'll be talking a lot more about it. The EDL claims Islamic law is poised to overthrow British society and calls for Britons to act aggressively to preempt it. The motto on the EDL's website says, "If we fail to show courage now, we will leave revolution, civil war, or subjugation to our children and our children's children. Any act of Muslim extremism will now be countered by the EDL." It's a great world, sports fans. That's all for today. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Wednesday. Take care.
Well, I know what you're doing. I see it all too clear. I only taste the saline when I kiss away your tears. You really have me going, wishing on a star. The black holes that surround